Do you want to buy a power station like a Jackery or EcoFlow, but get overwhelmed by all the choices? You want the best one for the least cost because you don't want to make a mistake and waste your money, but you don't even know where to start. Then this video is for you. There's no easy answer to the question, which power station should I buy? If there was, there wouldn't be so many to choose from. I'll go through how to figure out what to buy based on your needs, your desires, your lifestyle, and your budget. I'll also go through some general guidelines in case you don't want to do any math. I'll also tell you about some of the more important features that could make or break your power station experience. For example, do you want to run a fridge? Then don't make the same mistake I did and buy a power station that doesn't have the UPS function. By the end of this video, you should feel empowered and armed with knowledge. You'll know what power stations are, what size you need, how many watt hours you need. You'll have more confidence to make informed decisions. I'll also let you in on my secret weapon when it comes to shopping on Amazon. This is the first of a 4-part series. Part 2 will be how to charge, use, and maintain your power station. Part 3 will be about battery banks and their components instead of an all-in-one power station like this one. And Part 4 will be about solar panels. Click subscribe and hit the bell if you'd like to be notified when those videos are released. I posted in 3 very popular women's camping and van life groups on Facebook, and I asked, what questions do you have about power, power stations, and solar panels? I got a lot of responses, so this video is going to have a lot of information, and some parts might not be applicable to you. I'll include chapter information, so feel free to skip those parts you don't need and go back to the parts you want to review again. When deciding which power station will be right for you based on your needs, your lifestyle, and your budget, there are 3 big things to consider: watts, watt hours, and features. I received multiple requests for a very simple 101 on calculating your needs. So I created a worksheet that does all the math for you. All you have to do is add a few numbers of your own, but I'll go into that in a little bit. I'll also go over the features of power stations that you need to take into account so that you get the one that will be best for how you want to use it. But before I get to that, I need to address another request I received from a great number of you, which is to explain watts, watt hours, amps, amp hours, and volts, and how they all relate to each other. I'll explain that next, and I'll also tell you which parts of that you actually need to know. A good way to think of electricity is that it flows through wires like water flows through pipes or a garden hose. You can measure the volume or how much water is flowing through a hose in gallons per minute. In electricity, the volume is measured in amps. Volts are the pressure that cause the electricity to flow. Once water exits a hose, it can do work, such as turn a water wheel. The rate at which it can turn that wheel is watts. It doesn't matter if it's a narrow stream coming out through high pressure or a large stream coming out at low pressure. If both of those streams can turn the water wheel at the same speed, they're both the same wattage. So volume is measured in amps, the pressure is measured in volts, and the work it can do is measured in watts. But do you really need to know all that in order to get the best power station for you? Probably not. Here's what you do need to know. The 3 most common plugs that we use are the 12-volt DC, USB, And here in North America, where I and most of my viewers live, 120-volt AC. Power stations are also 12-volt DC like your car and have an inverter inside of them that converts the 12-volt DC to 120-volt AC. When someone says they're turning their inverter on, that means they're turning on the function that allows them to use the 120-volt outlets on their power stations, unless they have a standalone power inverter like this one that plugs into the cigarette lighter. When we talk about 12-volt DC or USB, we use amps. When we talk about 120-volt AC, we use watts. Every appliance or device you want to use will say how many watts or amps it requires in order to work. This hot water kettle says 800 watts. Every power station or battery will also say how many watts or amps it can supply. A 1000 watt power station might be enough to run a kettle. You need to make sure to buy a power station that will supply what your appliances need. Think of the electrical outlets in your house. Let's say you have this one power hog device, and you know that if you plug it into that outlet over there, it'll trip the breaker because the outlet can't handle that big of a load. But if you plug it into the one over there, it'll work just fine because that one can handle the higher demand. Also, if you use the toaster and the microwave on their own, no problem. But if you try to use them at the same time, it'll trip the breaker because you overloaded the circuit. When you demand more than the circuit will supply, you try to exceed the maximum wattage and you trip the breaker. With power stations, if you try to exceed the maximum wattage, the power station will turn off and won't work. Most of them have an auto reset, so instead of resetting a breaker like you do in your house, you just have to turn them on again. But how do you know what those maximums are? I'm going to be discussing some math here, but don't worry, my worksheet will do all of the calculations for you. This electric kettle label shows it requires 1500 watts to run, and it's a good idea to have a 20% buffer. That means you need a power station that says it is 1875 watts or higher in order to use this particular kettle. When devices start up, they often need some extra oomph, like how when you start your car's engine, it needs more battery power than once the car's running. That's surge. And power stations have the ability to compensate for those surges, and they state what surge wattage they can handle. For most of the things we use in van life, as long as we have a 20% buffer over the maximum wattage, which you'll see on the worksheet, then the power station will be able to handle it no problem. I've included the surge wattage for some appliances on my worksheet, so you can match those against what the power station states is their maximum. This kettle only requires 800 watts, so I can probably use it with a 1000 watt power station. If I try to use it with an 800 watt power station, such as this one though, the power station will most likely not be able to handle it due to the surge, and it will turn off. Look at the labels of everything you want to use and see which is the highest. Also, just like using the microwave and toaster together, if you'll be using multiple devices at the same time, add those watt numbers together. The highest number, plus 20%, is the minimum you need. Choosing lower wattage devices means you can get away with a lower wattage power station. That can save you money. I'll be making a video about my favorite low wattage appliances, but also let me know in the comments if there's something else you'd like me to make a video about. How about watt hours and amp hours? Imagine you're driving on the highway at 60 miles per hour. After 1 hour, you'll have traveled 60 miles. If you only drive for half an hour, you are still driving at a speed of 60 miles per hour, but you only traveled 30 miles. Those miles traveled are just like watt hours or amp hours. Say you have a 60-watt light you want to use. Just like how driving at 60 miles per hour for 1 hour puts you 60 miles down the road, using that 60-watt light for 1 hour will use 60 watt hours. Using the light for half an hour will use 30 watt hours, and running it for 2 hours will use 120 watt hours. This brings us to the next step, which is figuring out how many watt hours you use so you know how large of a battery you need. How many watt hours you need depends on what you want the battery for. Do you have a 12-volt fridge you want to run? Do you want to charge your phone or laptop? Run a fan? Use a coffee maker? Do you need to use a CPAP or do you want to run a heater? As we saw, every appliance or device will say how many amps or watts it requires. Knowing that and figuring out how long you want to run them for every day is this next step. It's finally time to get to the worksheet I keep talking about. I created a worksheet for figuring out your maximum combined wattage and watt hours that will do all of the math for you. I already filled in some of the most common devices people use in van life, and you just have to fill out how long you use them for in 24 hours, how many of each you want to use, and if you use more than one thing at the same time. You can change the values if what you use is different from what I've listed. After all, not all light bulbs are 60 watts. If you enter your own numbers, make sure to only use watts or only use amps plus volts for each item, not both, or you'll get double the value and it will skew all of your numbers. So let's go through how to use it. Here are some real-life examples of what I use in my van. I have a fridge that's 42 watts. That means it uses 42 watt hours every hour that it's running. But a fridge doesn't run 24/7. Once it reaches its set temperature, it turns off until it gets too warm, and then it turns on again. If I'm in a hot environment, it will be on more. If I'm in a cold environment, it will be on less. For this, let's say it cycles on and off for equal amounts of time, a total of 12 hours on and 12 hours off in 24 hours. Looking at the worksheet, I have fridge here in the devices column, 42 in the watts column, and I'll fill in 12 here in the hours per day column. The total watt hours is calculated for you. 42 watts times 12 hours is 504 watt hours. My cell phone charges at 12 watts. That means it uses 12 watt hours every hour, and I want to charge it for maybe 3 hours per day. So I'll put 3 in the hours per day column. 12 watts times 3 hours is 36 watts. For DC devices, we need to know both the amps and the volts. They're both listed on the labels. This USB fan is 2.5 amps at 5 volts. So I put 2.5 in the amps column and 5 in the volts column. I want to run it for 8 hours, so I'll put an 8 in the hours column. 2.5 amps times 8 hours is 20 amp hours. My worksheet will convert amp hours to watt hours for you, but if you want to do it yourself, you simply multiply the amp hours times the voltage. And that's why we need to know both the amps and the volts for DC devices. 20 amp hours times 5 volts is 100 watts. My small electric kettle is 800 watts, and I use it for about 16 minutes per day. 8 minutes to make coffee in the morning, and then 8 minutes to make tea in the evening. So I'm going to put 8 in the minutes column and 2 in the quantity column. You can also change the quantity if, for instance, you use more than one light. 800 watts times 8 minutes twice a day is 213 watt hours. And just like having the 20% buffer for surges, I need to have a 20% buffer for watt hours because the power station needs some of that battery for maintaining its own functions, like the LED display, being on standby, operating the battery management system, and the fan. Here in the total box, you can see the total of what I use each day plus 20% buffer is 1024 watt hours. If I need 1024 watt hours, this 1008 watt hour power station would be the minimum to work well as long as I could recharge it every day. If I can only recharge it every 2 days, I would need to double that number, so I would want to look at a 2000 watt hour power station or two 1000 watt hour power stations. But to be honest, I'd probably look for a power station with slightly higher watt hours so I had a little more wiggle room to run a few lights, run my kettle longer, things like that. I'd probably look for a 1200 watt hour power station if I could recharge it daily, and a 2500 watt hour power station if I could only recharge it every 2 days. Also, looking at my list of devices, the kettle is my highest wattage appliance at 800 watts, and I want to use it at the same time as my fridge. So I'm going to check the boxes for both of those, which will add them together. 800 watts plus 45 watts is 845 watts. Again, you want a 20% buffer, which brings it up to 1014 watts. So a 1000 watt power station will probably do nicely for running those things at the same time. If you want to use this worksheet for yourself, go over to File and then click Make a Copy. My public copy of this worksheet is protected, so it can't be altered, but once you save a copy for yourself, you'll be able to change all the numbers. Are you still confused and just want a general guideline? Here you go. A power station of about 300 watts, 300 watt hours, is good for charging your phone, a laptop, running a few lights, and a fan. They'll power a CPAP for just one night, but won't have enough watt hours to run your 12-volt fridge for a whole 24 hours. A power station that's 500 watts and about 500 watt hours will do everything the smaller one will do, plus it will run a CPAP for 2 nights. It will run a fridge for one day, but it won't have enough to run a fridge and do all the other things. A 1000 watt, 1000 watt hour power station is a pretty good choice for those who want to run a fridge, plus use some lights and fans, charge their phone, and occasionally use some other devices like a small kettle. They usually weigh about 25 to 30 pounds, so are still manageable for a lot of people to take in and out of their vehicles, but that's something you need to decide for yourself. A power station of 2000 watts, 2000 watt hours are big and heavy. They generally weigh 50 to 60 pounds. But with these, you can use higher wattage appliances, such as an Instant Pot, a microwave, an air fryer, a Keurig, or even an induction cooktop. 2500 watt and 2500 watt hour power stations are the big boys. They are really heavy, and they can even act as a home backup due to having higher output outlets, like a 30 amp outlet that you can plug your RV into. If you're finding this information helpful, please click like so YouTube will know and will suggest the video to others who may also benefit from it. A lot of people want to know if they can run a space heater with a power station. The answer is maybe, but usually only for a short time. On my worksheet, you can also do what ifs. Let's say you want to use an electric heater for 5 hours per day, a few hours in the evening before going to bed, and then again in the morning while waking up. You can plug those numbers in and see what happens to the total. This mini heater is 200 watts. If I want to use it for 5 hours, I'll put 5 in the hours column, and now I see I need another 1000 watt hours on top of the 845 watts I'm already using, for a total of 1845 watt hours. With a buffer, that's just over 2200 watt hours. That might be doable. A regular size space heater like this one, though, is 1000 watts on low, 1300 watts on medium, and 1500 watts on high. If I want to use that space heater for 5 hours, I need an extra 5000 watt hours just to use it on low. Power stations weigh 25 to 30 pounds for each 1000 watt hours, so I'd be looking at 150 to 180 pounds worth of battery power. That's a lot. A better choice might be a 120 volt electric blanket, which is 100 watts, a 12 volt blanket, which uses 46 watts, or something non electric, like a hot water bottle. This is why low wattage appliances and devices are so popular in van life. What are some of your favorite low wattage appliances? Let me know in the comments below. Let's go over some of the features of power stations. These can make or break your decision on which to buy. Weight. As we saw, bigger is not always better. If you want to run a lot of things, you may be considering one of the larger power stations. Are you planning on leaving the power station in your vehicle full time? Or will you be bringing it back and forth from your house? Or maybe you'll be bringing it in and out of Starbucks to charge it. If you're moving it around, even inside your van, weight might be a consideration. A BLUETTI AC2000W weighs 60 pounds. Would you be okay with that? If not, and you need a lot of watt hours, multiple smaller power stations, or a power station plus an expansion battery, which I'll get into soon, might be better options for you. Battery chemistry. Power station batteries are either lithium NMC, which is often just called lithium ion, or lithium iron phosphate, which is sometimes called LiFePO4. Lithium ion is a little lighter and has a little higher capacity for the same weight, but lithium iron phosphate batteries last 6 times longer on average. A lithium ion battery can typically be fully recharged 500 to 800 times, while a lithium iron phosphate battery can be fully recharged more like 3,000 to 4,000 times. If you're only using the power station several times per month or several times per year, this might not matter to you. Lithium iron phosphate batteries are also less likely to catch on fire if there's a short or if their cells are damaged. If safety is one of your priorities, then look for power stations with lithium iron phosphate batteries. Jackery still uses lithium ion batteries for a lot of their models, but many other manufacturers have switched over and use lithium iron phosphate batteries exclusively. Noise level. Power stations have fans that come on when they get warm from working. Will a fan cycling on and off during the night wake you up? Or will you sleep through it? If noise bothers you, then you should look for one of the quieter ones. If sound doesn't bother you, then picking one just because it has a quiet fan probably doesn't need to be on your list of priorities. AC charging speed. Some power stations support rapid charging and will charge from 0 to 100 in an hour. Some of them need 5 or 6 hours. Will you be charging your power station at home and then taking it with you for short trips? Will you charge it while driving and you drive a lot every day? If so, then a slow charging speed might not matter. If you'll be recharging your power station during your morning Starbucks run, then quick charging might be a really nice option for you. Keep in mind that it's better to charge the power station slowly. Constant fast charging won't damage the power station, but it will shorten its life. I'll go over what charging cycles are in a little bit. If you only use your power station for several times per month, then shortening that life cycle number by a little bit might not be a big deal. Solar charging speed. If you plan on charging via solar, take a look at the maximum solar input. If the maximum is only 100 watts and you have a 1,000-watt power station, the minimum amount of time you'll need to fully charge the power station under ideal conditions is 10 hours. If your maximum solar input is 500 watts and you have a 1,000 watt hour power station, under ideal conditions and with the right number of solar panels, you might be able to recharge the power station in just over 2 hours. Charging cables. Some power stations use DC or other plugs instead of this 3-slot plug. Most of us have a few of these 3-slot plugs left over from old computer monitors and other household appliances, but not a lot of us have the right size DC adapter that will fit a particular power station just laying around. If you're moving the power station around or bringing it in and out of your van, the cord might get lost or damaged. I'm constantly losing things, so the ability to easily replace cords is a big one for me. Proprietary plugs. While we're on the subject of charging cords, some companies use proprietary plugs for connecting solar panels, and some even use proprietary charging cables. EcoFlow, Goal Zero, BLUETTI, and Jackery all do this for some of their models. This means that you can only use their specific cords or their specific solar panels to charge your power station. If you lose that cord or it gets damaged by, for instance, being too close to the hot plate or getting closed in a car door, good luck finding another one. Sometimes you can find a replacement cord, but for some of them, they don't even make that cord anymore. You lose or damage that cord, and you have a 25-pound or even 60-pound brick that you paid a lot of money for and can't use anymore. One of the advantages of using one of the smaller brands is that they almost always use industry standard cords. Weatherproof. Some power stations are waterproof and dustproof. Is that something you need? If you're going to be spending a season in quartzsite, you might want a power station that's dustproof. Most power stations are not weatherproof, so unless it's a real need and not just a nice to have, you might want to put that one lower on your list of priorities. UPS function. UPS stands for uninterruptible power supply. Just like how your cell phone or your laptop go to standby if you don't use them for a certain time in order to conserve power, when a power station doesn't detect demand above a certain minimum amount, it partially turns off. The UPS function keeps the power station in standby so that when it detects demand again, it wakes back up. If there's no UPS function, then you have to push a button to wake the power station up again. That's what happened to me. I bought a 1,000 watt, 1,000 watt hour power station, so I thought I was all set, but my fridge kept turning off. I'd wake up in the morning to a bunch of warm food inside. Back then, I didn't know that I needed a power station with a UPS function. A fridge will run until it gets to a set temperature and then go to standby. While the fridge is in standby, it draws less power than the battery management system is set to detect, so the power station will shut down. When the temperature in the fridge drops, the fridge will try to cycle back on. If you don't have a UPS function, you need to manually turn the power station back on each time. With the UPS function, the fridge demanding power will turn the power station back on automatically. Pass-through charging is the ability to both charge and use the power station at the same time. If you're charging via solar, so it's taking a few hours, and you still want to use your power station for running your fridge or other things, then pass-through charging will be really handy. On the other hand, if you bring your power station somewhere to charge it on its own, you probably aren't going to be using it at the same time, so you can skip this feature. Wireless app. Some power stations have a mobile app, which is really convenient. You can check battery and charging levels and turn things like the 120 outlets on and off remotely. This is particularly helpful if you have the power station in a place in your van that's not easily accessible. Expandability. That's the ability to add an auxiliary battery. BLUETTI, EcoFlow, and a few other companies sell expansion batteries. These plug into and add more battery life to their compatible power stations. When you add more gas to your car, it doesn't make it go faster, it allows you to drive farther. When you add an expansion battery pack to a power station, it's like adding extra gas to your car. It doesn't increase the wattage. A 1000 watt power station will remain a 1000 watt power station. What it does is increase the watt hours so it lasts longer. But why would you want an expansion battery instead of a second power station? If you have your power station set up somewhere in your van that's not very accessible and you have all your things plugged in all the time, adding an expansion battery allows you to add more watt hours without having to remove all of those things and move the power station itself. Also, the expansion battery has limited functionality, so it's usually cheaper than buying a second fully functioning big power station from one of the name brands. Number and types of outlets. Are you planning on using multiple devices at the same time, like the fridge, cell phone, and a fan? Do you usually plug things into the power station only when you need them and then unplug them when you're done? Or do you have more of the full-time setup where everything is plugged in all the time and the power station isn't very accessible? How many 120-volt outlets do you plan to have things plugged into all the time? Your situation is going to inform which type of outlets you need and how many of each. Charging cycles. The storage capacity of batteries goes down with use. Charging cycles refers to how many times the battery can be completely discharged and recharged until the battery capacity reaches 80% of the original stated maximum. If you use 60% of the battery one day, charge it, and use 40% of the battery the next day and recharge it, 60% plus 40% is 100%. That's one full charging cycle, even though you didn't start at zero. Some power stations are rated for 500 charge cycles, and some are rated for 4,000 cycles. If you have a 1,000 watt hour battery that's rated for 3,000 cycles, then after the battery goes through 3,000 full discharge and recharge cycles, it will only hold 80% of that 1,000 watt hours, which is 800 watt hours. If you have a power station that's rated for 4,000 life cycles until its capacity is down to 80%, that means you can fully use the power station 100% every single day for 11 years and still hold 80% of the original storage capacity. It's not like the battery is dead after those 3,000 to 4,000 charging cycles. It just doesn't hold as much anymore. Self-heating. Lithium iron phosphate batteries will be damaged if you try to use or charge them when their internal temperatures are below freezing. Some batteries and power stations have heaters inside of them so that they remain above freezing. If you have a portable power station or separate battery that you'll be storing in a heated space for winter, then you don't need this feature. If your batteries will remain in an unheated space during freezing weather and you have them disconnected, you also won't need this feature. It's only when you want to use or charge them when they're freezing that the self-heating feature is needed. Likewise, power stations won't work very well and can be damaged by extreme heat. If you have batteries in your vehicle and the interior is likely to get super hot, crack a few windows to get some air circulating. Warranty. Some companies warranty their products for longer than others. Also, some offer only limited liability warranties or want you to pay to ship products back to them for warranty service. If you have a 60-pound device, that's really expensive to ship. But this is where my secret weapon on Amazon comes in. My secret weapon is Assurion's Complete Protect monthly warranty subscription. When you add certain items to your Amazon cart, it asks if you want to purchase an extended warranty. One of the options is to sign up for this monthly plan. The Assurion Complete Protect plan protects every purchase that asks that warranty question, whether you click on it again or not. Once you sign up, it also covers all eligible items for the year prior to signing up automatically. Coverage ends once you no longer pay the monthly fee, so you need to be in this for the long haul if you want to go this route. Before getting this monthly plan, I would buy individual extended warranty coverage for things such as laptops, phones, and other expensive and fragile electronics. Switching to the monthly plan covers all of these things, so it saves me money. I've used the Assurion warranty multiple times, and they have been great. For example, my son's laptop was only about 2 months old when some of the screws in the case started falling out, which caused damage to the case due to it opening up and flexing. I contacted the manufacturer, and even though I consider it a manufacturer's defect and we were still well within the original warranty period, they wouldn't cover it. Assurion did. They sent us a postage paid shipping box. We sent them the laptop, and they shipped it back to us a week later, all fixed, no charge. That's good service. Knowing I have this good service, I don't mind taking a risk on lesser known manufacturers who may or may not provide good warranty service on their own, or even still be in business in a few years. I know that if it does break and Assurion can't fix it, they'll refund my original purchase price up to $5,000 per year. Power stations are convenient because they're all-in-one solutions, but they're not the only way to power your van. You can get the batteries and all of the components that are inside the case and install them separately. This is a much larger job and generally a permanent installation. The advantage is that you can get a larger system, have built-in outlets wherever you want them, both inside and even outside your van, and you can very easily expand it. I'll go over the basics of that type of system in part 3 of this 4-part series. So you went through the worksheet or the general guide. You know the minimum wattage that you need to power your appliances. You know how many watt hours you need in order to run those appliances for as long as you want to run them. And you know which features are important to you. So it's time to head to Amazon and shop the sales. Once you find a power station you're interested in, put it in your cart because a lot of the model numbers are really similar and it's easy to get confused and not remember which one you were looking at. So put it in your cart and then go watch some reviews of that power station to see it in action. Power stations are on sale pretty often and the prices are always changing. So which power station offers the best features for the lowest price is always changing too. Also, best features is subjective. What the best features are for me might not be the same for you. Another question is, which is better, BLUETTI, Jackery, or EcoFlow? They all make very high quality power stations, have good customer service and great warranties, but so do other smaller brands. They also sometimes charge a premium for their names. And like I mentioned, some of their models use proprietary plugs, which makes it difficult to replace cords if they're damaged or lost. A big exception to this is BLUETTI's newest release, the Elite 200 V2, which uses industry standard cables and is a total beast of a power station. It's 2,600 watts and 2,073 watt hours. I've even been considering buying one of these for myself. I'll put a link to that power station in the description below. If you're interested in it, I suggest again putting in your Amazon cart before you go to YouTube to watch some reviews about it, so you know you have the right one in there when you get back to your cart. And you can also refer back to that number again when you go to YouTube. Do you have questions I didn't answer, or is anything still unclear? Feel free to leave a comment, ask a question, or suggest a video topic. As I mentioned, I'll be making 3 more videos in this series. Part 2 will be how to charge, use, and maintain your power station. Part 3 will be about battery banks and their various components instead of using all-in-one power stations. And Part 4 will be about solar panels. Click subscribe below and hit the bell if you'd like to be notified when those videos are released. And please click the like button if you haven't already. Thanks for sticking with this long and information-heavy video. Check out my other videos here, and thanks for watching.